Today we're talking about one of my favorite Bible characters named Jacob. 15 years ago, I preached my very first sermon on Jacob, and so I thought it might be fitting to preach on Jacob on this final sermon here for me at Central Christian Church. Jacob is not always exactly likable, but he's always interesting. And something I said in that first sermon was Jacob always wins. And that seems to be the case, though not without some twists and turns along the way. Let me kind of catch you up on who Jacob is in case your memory of Genesis is a little rusty. He is one of twin sons born to Isaac and Rebekah. So that makes him the grandson of who? Choir, don't answer. You were here early. Abraham, right. He's the grandson of Abraham. So you get a gold star, Betty. And so he and his brother struggled even in the womb. It said that they struggled, and Esau, his brother, was born first, and Jacob came out holding on to his heel. Now, his mother, Rebekah, had received this prophecy that the younger of the two was going to be the greater, and that the older would serve the younger. So I don't know if it was because of this prophecy that she had received or if it was just a matter of personalities. But Rebekah favored Jacob and Isaac favored Esau. They both had their favorites. Now Esau was this big, hairy, brutish, sort of outdoorsy guy. And Jacob was the exact opposite. He was fair and smooth of skin, and he liked to hang around the camp. And Danny and I have always said that this was a foretelling of the two of us. Except Jacob and Esau didn't get along, and Danny and I do most of the time. Jacob was always just sort of, sticking it to Esau a little bit. He convinced him to sell him his birthright, which is becoming the head of the household after the death of the father. He sold him that for a bowl of soup when he was hungry. And then Jacob and his mother conspired to get Esau's blessing. As Isaac was on his deathbed, wanting to give his blessing to his oldest son, the two of them sort of conspired together to get that blessing for Jacob instead. So when Esau found out about that, he was not what you might call happy. And he put out the word, when our father's dead and after the period of mourning is over, I'm going to kill you. And so Rebekah sent Jacob off to her homeland to live with her brother. And so Jacob went and stayed with his uncle Laban, who sort of was Jacob's match. He kind of met his match in Uncle Laban. They both were sort of swindlers and tricksters, and maybe it ran in the family. It's a long story what happened while he was there. You can read it for yourself, but he gets married to a couple of Laban's daughters. He has children. He amasses lots of wealth, livestock and animals and things like that. So he's there for 20 years, and God speaks to him and says, it's time for you to go back home. So he's on the way home with all of his family and his servants and his livestock, and then he remembers, oh yeah, that big, mean, hairy brother of mine is probably still mad at me. So he sends out some messengers ahead of him to kind of get a feel for where Esau may be in all of this. It's been 20 years. Maybe he softened his heart a little bit when it came to his relationship with his brother. And the messengers came back and said, yeah, Esau's coming to meet you, and he's got 400 men with him. So Jacob, as you do, puts together a little gift basket for Esau. Like 600 animals, sheep and goats and camels and cows, and sends it on ahead and says, if you see Esau, you tell him, if he asks what all this is, you just tell him it's from his brother Jacob. And so what's a little bribery between brothers, So then we read this. Genesis 32, verse 22. The same night he got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything he had. Jacob was left alone. he was alone and waiting. Those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. But as for me, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul that seeks him. Waiting is a holy activity. It renews our strength. It brings salvation. It draws us closer to God. And it's the worst thing in the world, and I hate it. How well I do with waiting when I have to depends on a few factors. One being my mood. The other being the situation that requires the waiting. Generally, it all comes down to whether or not I have any control of the situation. And I found a video that I thought you might identify with. So take a look at this video about waiting.
Ooh, I don't know. The Irish cream sounds good, huh? What's that?
It's cream and it's Irish.
Hurry up and order!
Excuse me. Thank you. How about a smoothie? What's in that?
Smoothie's a juice drink. We want coffee.
Buddy, relax.
No, you relax. I'm a regular here. This line needs to move.
I beg your pardon. Do you have scones?
Tall, non-fat, double latte.
Sir, you're at the back of the line.
I recognize that.
Cut it out or you're out of here.
You can't kick me out.
You know what? You're really invading my ear space.
Look, I'm a frequent coffee drinker. I'm part of the club. I have a card. Do you have a card? Do you have a card?
No, I don't have
Does
a
anyone
card.
here have a card?
We don't have frequent drinker cards.
That's a video club card.
Ah!
Zip it there, Sporty Spice.
Are we doing this?
Oh.
Is this happening now?
Yeah, want to?
Sir?
Great, I'd
Let's
love
do
to.
it.
You're hurting me! You're hurting me!
Anybody identify? Now, I can tell you, in this scenario, that would never happen to me. I would not get angry or lose my temper or get frustrated at all because I would just leave. If there's a long line, I leave. There's too many restaurants, too many coffee shops for me to have to wait in any line. Same thing at the drive-thru. 3 cars, I'm going somewhere else. And if they call my order back wrong, I also drive off, but that's a different situation. But in those situations, I'm in control. I'm in control of whether I stay or go, if I, choose this place or not. But sometimes we're not in control of the situation, like the post office, like they have stuff that only they have and you have to wait in the line to get to it, or the airport when they cancel your flight and there's nothing to do. You're completely at their mercy. And then the other one that gets me most often is traffic. Sitting in traffic, surrounded by idiots. I'm sorry, precious children of God. You start with the eye roll and the deep exhale, and you get fidgety, and then, you tap on the steering wheel, and then you hit the steering wheel, and then you yell something out, and then you're still sitting in traffic. It didn't do you any good. Waiting just seems like a waste of time, a waste of energy, especially needless waiting, useless waiting, like when that friend calls or your spouse calls and says, hey, can we get together? I need to talk to you about something. No, just tell me right now. Like, good or bad, just tell me what it is. Let's please not drag this out. And the very worst thing is medical results. How many times have you heard that? Where we're still waiting on the test. We're still waiting on the result. Every medical test should have an immediate result. If I have 6 weeks to live, I don't want to waste one of them waiting to find it out. So, sometimes, though, I guess waiting is necessary. It's not needless. God seems to be a big fan of it, if you read through the Bible. Noah and his family were on the ark with all those animals for over a year. Moses was in the wilderness with the people of Israel for 40 years. There was about a 700-year period between when Isaiah prophesied the coming of the Messiah and Jesus' birth. There must be some value to waiting, but what really is the purpose of it? I mean, what are we supposed to learn from being in limbo? What do we do in that awful place between what is and what is to be? Now, Jacob had avoided his brother for 2 decades, but now there's no more avoiding him. The time has come. They're going to meet, and the only thing between him and Esau is this long night ahead of him. I'll continue with his story. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the day is breaking. But Jacob said, I will not let you go, unless you bless me. So he said to him, what is your name? He said, Jacob. Then the man said, you shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved. The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the hip socket, because he struck Jacob on the hip socket at the thigh muscle. For Jacob, he encountered God in the waiting. He didn't really have much control of the situation. His possibly mad and most likely dangerous brother is coming towards him with an army of 400, and he's truly scared. He's frightened. But in this waiting time, Jacob encountered God, and he wrestled with God, and he questioned God, and he talked to God, and he demanded from God a blessing. Jacob wrestled with God all night, all night long. And he came out of it with the blessing that he sought, as well as a limp, because encounters with God leave their mark. Jacob also came out of it with what I imagine he thought to be the ultimate check mark on his win column. Proudly he said, "I have seen God face to face, and I live to tell about it." And that's true, I guess. It does seem he outlasted God in this struggle. And when he finally does meet Esau, Esau runs to him and embraces him, and the violins play and the credits roll, and it's, happy ending. But here's the thing. God, being God and all, could have just thumped Jacob like a little bug off of his arm. It's like when you're little and your dad lets you think you won the arm wrestling match. That's kind of how I view this story. But the most important thing, I think, is that Jacob wrestled, struggled, and fought all night with God for a blessing that God had freely given to him 20 years before. The night that he left home, he went to sleep. And he had a dream. Do any of you remember this story? And he dreamed of a ladder, a stairway to heaven, and angels ascended and descended. Do you remember that story? And God spoke to him in that dream and said, "Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. And I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Sounds similar to me to the final message that the resurrected Jesus gave to his disciples and to us before he sent them back to Jerusalem to wait for the coming of the Holy Spirit. Jesus said, "Remember, I'm with you always to the end of the world." That's the promise. That's the promise we have to remember. That's the promise that makes this life bearable and beautiful. That assurance from Jesus points us to God. And it pushes us to search for God and to encounter God in all seasons, but I think most particularly in seasons of waiting. When we're waiting for the diagnosis. When we're waiting for word from our child who's in harm's way. Waiting for an apology that may never come. Waiting for an answer. For change to be easy. Making the decision to leave this place and go to another, for me, truly compares to this story of Jacob wrestling with God, because I fought and I struggled and I prayed and I demanded to know the answer, to know what to do, because this place is so special and this place is safe. This place is home. And you are my family. And so even after God had spoken to me clearly in song, in words, in images, in memories, and with sighs too deep for words, I still looked up and said, "Are you sure?" But I knew. And I limped away from that encounter with God, because encounters with God leave their mark. This week I read something that said, a period of waiting always precedes new creation. And that's the question. How will we spend that time of anticipation? We can struggle through it like Jacob, like me, wrestling with God, demanding a blessing that's already been given. Or we can trust. We can trust in the promise that our risen Lord gave to us and embrace the opportunity to encounter God with hope for a brighter tomorrow. Either way, God's in the waiting. And that new creation we've been waiting for will all be revealed in good time.